Jules, what have you been up to?
Introduce myself?
Yeah, please.
So I'm Jules. I'm one of the partners at IVP. We're a late-stage fund, so a little bit different in that we just focus on companies generally over 10 million in revenue. We're looking for the fastest-growing companies. My first investment I worked on at IVP was super lucky. I invested in Twitter when it was 22 people. Amazing growth, and I have not done anything remotely close to that since. So
you know, not to heckle your introduction. You just told me that you invested in things that were 10 million-ish revenue or bigger, but
yes.
you know, but Twitter was 0 million at that time. So why, you know, it was like 10 million.
It worked in hindsight, though. So
it's like 10 million in revenue,
or
your servers are on fire and the fail whale keeps coming up, and so that would be great. Like the thing totally doesn't even work. Let's fund it.
Yeah.
That was your
plan.
Well,
the funny story with Twitter, it was the first investment. I was a vice president before I was promoted, and I had Ev Williams and Bizstone come into our office, and before Ev came in, I was really nervous because that's what the firm told me. We only invest in things with lots and lots of revenue, and so I told Ev, I got a slide deck, and I said, you have to put in a slide about how you're going to make money because that's all our firm cares about. So he put in this slide which said, we're going to be millions and millions of users. We'll do advertising and we'll make like $100 bajillion. And it was this totally BS slide, and none of my partners believed it. We didn't believe it, but we were so excited about the user metrics, we couldn't let it go. So I actually think sometimes you make exceptions to rules. We did that with Snapchat when it was also about 10 people. And the scale in consumer businesses are, a lot of times you just get massive scale in users before you get scale in revenue. And so it's still a very late stage business. Both Twitter, which we invested in about $200 to $300 million valuation, and Snapchat was almost $1 billion valuation. Both of those are pretty late stage valuations, and in hindsight, we were really happy. But at the time, everybody thought we were completely crazy.
So Ev wouldn't even give me that slide, by the way, when he pitched the Series A, which was
earlier.
10 people, and I said, so how, this is super exciting, and I can imagine how it works. I said, so how are you thinking? And it was Ev and Jack. I was like, how are you guys thinking about monetizing it? Yeah. And they said, yeah, we aren't.
Ever.
And I was like, no, I get you're not thinking about it now, but like when you do think about it, how are you thinking about it? And they said, yeah, we aren't. And I was like, oh my God, throw me a bone. I'm a venture capitalist. I have to like pretend this thing someday makes money. That seems like a thing we should pretend. Although that seems to not be cool anymore. So maybe I'm just an idiot. Like, stop worrying about the money, you idiot. Just get big, spend money. That's what we should do. Dafina, how did you end up in the venture business?
Well, first of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me.
Oh my God!
I feel honored to be here with all of you guys.
No,
and all of you guys.
So this is actually super important, which is Tom Stringham, who is the University Growth Fund. Tom invited me to a little conference, like 6 or 7 years ago, of students. And he's like, hey, would you come out? And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll have to talk to students, fly out. And I love Tom, and I love what they were doing, and I had this time. And so each year he'd be like, so could you want to come out again? I'm like, yeah, one year I got caught in a snowstorm. But anyway, so I appreciate you reminding me. So Tom and the University Growth Fund are amazing folks, and they invited us out to do this panel. And then they're like, oh, we're actually going to combine, and it'll be, it'll be a slightly bigger room. So yeah, it's gotten slightly bigger. So thank you, Tom, and the fund, and I apologize for shirking this is how bad of a moderator I am. I'll interrupt you guys. I will actually do all the speaking. I won't even make the announcements I'm supposed to. This is the best panel you'll attend all day. Okay, where were you? I'm sorry.
Okay, so where was I? First of all, thank you all for being here. It's one of the fullest rooms that at least I have been part of, at least on the panel here. I happen to be lucky enough to be literally surrounded by friends. Jules and I went to business school together, same class. And Ben and I have known each other for over 7 years, which leads me to my first investment. Jules and I started in venture at exactly the same time. And one of my very first investments was a company with a CEO who is from Park City. And his name is Matthew Prince, and the name of the company is Cloudflare. And Ben and I worked together on that investment. We were the seed stage investors. At the time, I was in a firm called Venrock. And we backed literally a couple of entrepreneurs, Matthew and Michelle. And the company has since grown to be, 300 people or more? 400 people. And it's a company that we're very happy with. I have very strong affinity for Utah, as you can tell. I come here at least once every 6 weeks. I'm on the board of another Utah-based company. I really like backing Utah-based CEOs. The name of the company is InsideSales.com. I invested in that company 4 years ago. And in fact, I invested in the company as part of joining another venture firm, US Venture Partners, and I pretty much made it a conditional upon my joining the firm that we invest in Inside Sales. So the day I signed my offer, a couple of my partners and I got on a plane to come here to Provo to visit the company and to start working on due diligence.
So by the way, that is completely insane. The idea that you say, like, I might join your firm, but you must invest in this company. The fact that it turned out to be like one of the greatest companies ever created in the state of Utah and in the country is convenient, but at the time, did you know this? Did you have this, you just had this sense? Or
Are you suggesting I'm a good negotiator?
I think I think that you're a genius. I think you're a genius because not only did you manage to get to this great new firm, but also you managed to bring along with you basically a career-defining investment, right?
Well, okay, so the truth is I said, let's look at it, and if I can convince you guys that this is a good investment, then we should invest in it. But I wanted them to be very serious about looking at it as opposed to just saying, oh, sure, and not have anyone show up at the presentation, which can happen sometimes.
Well, they got on the plane, so that's good.
We got on the plane because we tried to schedule a meeting and they wouldn't return our calls. So he finally,
They're
CEO,
inside sales, though. It shouldn't
I know,
be like
exactly. You think, exactly, especially since they're preaching that if you
can't
want to
go
sell
wrong.
something, you have to return a call within 7 minutes of the
Yeah, but
lead reaching out.
if you have limited supply and there's a lot of demand,
You can be hard to get.
You can be choosy.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
right.
But he agreed to take a phone call, and we just showed up at the door. And when we walked in, the front desk person said, are you guys here applying for a job? Here's the job application. And we thought, oh, we're at the right place. If this is a company that everybody who goes through the door is someone they think is applying for a job here, then they must be growing fast enough for us to be interested in it.
I just hope you filled it out as board member.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Good job
I
with
know,
the
I
CV.
should have.
Exactly. So Ben, how about you?
I'm a partner with Pelion Venture Partners, an early stage firm based here in Salt Lake. As Defina talked about, this is a panel of friends. We get to be David's entourage as he does his thing. But
Yeah, wait until we go to to Park City afterwards. That's gonna be crazy, madness.
It's really nice to be, to have Defina remind me of one of the first investments that I made as a VC and one that's turned out very well, which is Cloudflare, and that's really been a great journey for me as an investor, but also the friends that I've made along the way have been wonderful too.
So let me ask you. This is actually. So one of my earliest investments was a company called Splunk, and it was 3 founders, and I funded them, and it's now a public company, and I do look back. I mean, we all, as we go through this venture business, we march in, and okay, I'll do Twitter, I'll do Inside Sales, I'll do Cloudflare. Which, by the way, if you don't know how big and interesting those businesses are, look, they're stunning. I mean, Twitter, whatever, that. But it's sort of stunning. And so and now that I'm like old and I've been at this a long time, I've been at August for 17 years, and so. My first 3 of my first 4 investments ended up being quite good, and 2 of my first 4 investments ended up being $1 billion or bigger, which is amazing. And I just wonder if I'll ever replicate that again in my life, like even half of that. And so I'm wondering, what do you think it is that we come into this business stupid or naive or whatever, and end up funding some of the best stuff of our lives? Do you think, or is it just me and actually you're all going to do great, and I'm going to suck for the rest of time? Like,
I think it's a lot of luck. I consider myself to be very lucky, and someone a long time ago told me, in fact, the first person who interviewed me for my first venture job at Venrock, Tony's son, who was the managing partner, he said, I only have one question. And we had scheduled an hour-long interview, and he said, I only have one question. And I said, I was very curious. I said, yeah. He said, are you lucky or are you smart? I said, wow, I really want to be both. Is that okay? Is that part of the answer? Is that A, B, and C? Or is it just lucky or smart? He's like, you know, in this business, you just have to be smart enough to avoid the bullet to the head. And the rest is just luck. And, 7 years ago, now 8 years ago, I thought, oh, I really hope that's not the case because luck is not something under my control. And, you want to believe that you are in control of your career outcome and of your success. And as I have experienced those 7 years of investing and maybe have gotten also older and wiser, I think I believe more and more that he's absolutely right, that a lot of it is luck and a little bit of smarts probably.
I think when you start in this business, the way you think about it is that it's a great job and you're really lucky to have this job and everything else. And then as you move further along in the business, it feels harder and harder. That the longer you do this, the more you realize how difficult it is. And I think that is something that is universal through most investors, because even if you get lucky with your first few investments, inevitably there are going to be investments where things do not go very well. And how you navigate that and how you maintain your relationships through those navigations and how you deal with your co-investors and the management teams, those things are defining in terms of future deal flow, and it's never, and in terms of success for your entrepreneurs, success for your fund, et cetera, and you don't know what the right answer is. You're dealing in a very uncertain topography in some of those cases.
When I was quite new to the venture business, I went to the National Venture Capital Association annual meeting. Have you ever gone to the NVCA annual meeting?
I don't.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, don't go to that. So I went to the NVCA meeting.
They're nice.
I'm sorry, whoever's watching this video. So I went to the NVCA meeting, and they had a young venture capitalist gathering. And so I said, oh, well, I guess I'll go to the young VC. This was when I was a young VC. And there was a speaker, and he was talking about control of your career, to your point, I want to have this control over my career, and the venture business is a whole bunch of uncertainty. And so, oh, great, I'm going to hear this, I'm going to have this control of your career. And the speaker was saying, you need to create a personal business plan, and you have to focus on, what am I going to do, and what are the deliverables of this year, and how you control. And what do you think? Everybody's raising their hands, and finally, someone raised their hand that infuriated me and said, who among us would be foolish enough to fund a company that didn't have a business plan? No one would do that, so why would we live a career that wasn't a business plan? I put up my hand, and they foolishly, they call on me, and I say, that's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. This is not a world in which a business plan is relevant the day after it's written. So why in the world would you be encouraging people to take the time out of their life to do? Anyway, the speaker was furious. Everybody in the room was furious. They all thought I was a moron, all this stuff, except for one guy who I ended up chatting with afterwards, was a guy named Jeff Curl, who at the time was a VC. He was working as a venture capitalist. And Jeff and I hung out, and we became friends. And anyway, Jeff obviously, had he written his business plan, it wouldn't have involved his path, and now we are backers of his company Stance, which again, I don't, you break rules. If you had asked me, hey, David, are you going to fund a sock company as a high-tech VC? I would have gone, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. But when Jeff Curl was building a sock brand and creating this sort of very interesting business, you say, well, yeah, okay, I'll do that, right?
And you're wearing them right now, looks like.
I am
right?
wearing
Okay.
Stance socks every day. It's a requirement, but the good news is also, if you visit us in our office, we also have a Stance stand, and we can give you some Stance socks as a parting gift, which is nice. What do you guys have in your office that you give to your folks who come pitch you? Do you candies or Diet Coke?
We have vests for portfolio companies,
oh,
which are
for-
the hot,
oh,
that's
all
the
right.
hot thing
All right.
in San Francisco, because it's not as cold as it is here, but you always need to have vests.
You gotta have the. What do you think about this question of branding? So there's this whole world now. When I joined the venture business, there was no such thing as a venture brand. You'd never be like, oh, there's gonna be a VC on the cover of some business magazine, because VCs were these supporting characters. We didn't. You stayed in the background, in the shadows, lurking in the shadows. That sounds a little more nefarious than it is. How are you all thinking about the brand, your brand and your firm's brand? Is that something you think about, or do you just try and find great deals? And
I just try to find good investments. I mean, I think it's, as a late stage investor, I think you're coming in after really good early stage folks, like a lot of people here have backed the companies, and the last thing you want to do is try to be like, IVP's coming in, and now it's the IVP way, and really you just want to be super deferential, and hey, if we're lucky enough to be an investor in some of the best companies that early stage VCs have backed, that's a great business for us. And so I think the more we put focus on the entrepreneurs and the less the venture capitalists there's actually focus on, I think probably just the better for the ecosystem. So I do a lot of things like personally like that are different. Like I don't like companies coming into our office to present to us. I just love going actually to the company's offices. I learn way more about the companies. I feel it's more, you have a little more humility, you understand things, and it's also just having that same respect for their business as anything. I mean, it's we're in a super lucky profession where like I've got 13 portfolio companies right now. If one's not going well, like I can focus on the other ones. If an entrepreneur's like they dedicate their life and soul to things and things aren't going well, I mean, it's super lonely. And so I don't know. I don't really like branding. We do try to brand as like late stage and have people get known for that, but other than that, we're not trying to be superheroes up here.
so you haven't hired a marketing firm or a marketing partner. Do either of you have marketing partners or no?
No, I don't think my marketing has ever been a strong skill of a US VP of my firm, and it might be. It's an important question, and I think it's important to have a deliberate strategy, even if that is to not have a strategy, is to make that decision deliberately. And I think for us, we just don't think about it. We probably should, but we don't. I would say that for me, it's important to develop strong relationships that generate a lot of loyalty, and that comes from treating the relationship with high integrity and trying to be helpful and generating goodwill. So and in the end, hoping that the people you've helped can speak for you. I don't know that that's sufficient. I'm not sure if that's sufficient, but that's really what we have collectively as a firm relied on, and what I personally rely on.
Yeah. The thing about the venture business that's perfectly clear is that nothing is sufficient, right? Or we'd all do those things, right? If this was like, if you do this and you do this and you do this, then you invest in good companies that succeed and get to great outcomes and you make money, then we do those things, right? And I'm pretty sure we're all sitting here every day trying to do those things. I mean, oddly enough, this is one of those things. So here we are on a panel. Why, is it? But why is that a thing, right? Why have we done that? Well, I think we've done it because, one, we like hearing ourselves talk. That may just be me. Two, we want to connect with lots and lots of smart, thoughtful entrepreneurs, and here's a room full of you. And three, we want to make sure we connect with other people in the industry. So when I joined the venture business and I described to my wife, like, I got to fly to Utah or whatever, and she'd always say, like, well, what do you have to do that? Because when I started in the venture business, I had 4 small children. I think I had a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old. So me going away was like her worst nightmare. So every time I'd say, I'm going to go give this talk, whatever, she'd say, like, do you have to do that? And I'd always say, no. And she'd go, well, why are you going? I said, well, because I don't know what I have to do. If someone gave me the manual, then I'd do those things, right? But instead, we all do a set of things. So Jules already sort of hinted at one of his things, which is, don't call them into your conference room, but if you're excited about a company, go to it. I'm curious, Ben and others, like, what do you do? Like, a lot of people are curious about, like, what is it that is the job of venture capital, other than being up here pontificating?
So I think, Defina hit on this to some degree, but, part of the brand and what we do is build relationships. And those relationships I think the word networking is something that always drives me bananas, because networking is not what building relationships is about. It's about friendships. And fundamentally, those friendships are built over a long period of time with lots of different people, and you're not sure when those friendships are going to intersect with your professional VC life, but eventually they do. And I think all of us find a very thin line between our professional and our personal friendships, and that those relationships have ripples that ripple through all of the companies that we get involved with, the advice that we give companies, the anecdotes, and the other guidance and patterns that we can sort of help our CEOs and management teams see. I think that's a huge part of our job, is building those relationships and those tethers that bring the community and companies together.
And so, do you have any, I mean, is that just hanging out with smart people who you like, or is there something specific to that, or is it really just about trying to be a productive member of the broader ecosystem?
So there's actually, Paul Graham, the former head of Y Combinator, wrote this wonderful blog post about the power law of VC returns. And that essentially everything he had done up to that point, other than Airbnb and Dropbox, had been his contribution to the greater ecosystem, because all of his returns were concentrated in those two names. And that power law of returns is very real. So for all of us, when we've had, thankfully, successes that have overwhelmed any losses that we've suffered in our portfolios, but it's fundamental that there are going to be a lot of companies that we're going to spend a lot of time on that aren't going to yield outsized outcomes for either our firms or our limited partners, or for the management teams for that matter. And helping shepherd those difficult companies through and getting to outcomes that make sense is part of building those long-term relationships for when they go start another company.
So the fact that I funded Garrett Camp's and Travis Kalanick's first companies but didn't fund Uber makes me a giant moron. I've paid it forward until that point. I know that, but it points to the trickiness of the venture business, right? Which is, like, that's great, and you want to be a good and productive member of the ecosystem, but at the end of the day, you then assess things in the context of the moment, right? And at the time, Uber felt like a limousine service for rich kids. And I was like, I don't know how that gets to be big enough. Well, that was obviously wrong, but So now you guys entered right out of B school. It's interesting that we often say, like, oh, venture isn't actually a career and you can't go and apply for it or whatever, and somehow you both ended up in it. What was that path? And was it clear to you that this was the job you wanted and just had to power your way in, or?
So I got super lucky. I actually started in venture in 2004, and after like a few years of investment banking, I worked for a firm called Robertson Stevens, and then got recruited to be a super low-level associate. And one of my first presentations I saw was Josh James when he did Omniture, and I came back to my firm and I was like, this guy is going to change the world. He's the most amazing person in the world. And I just was, because he was so different than every other presenter, and the numbers were great. And so that was one of my investments I worked on at my old firm. And then I went to business school at Defina, and I came out of business school, and I actually wanted to be an operator. And I spent my summer at a company called AdMob that did mobile advertising. And I was in business development, and they offered me a job to do business development in Europe, which was really exciting. But at the same time, when you're in venture, you get to do things as like a 24-year-old that are incredible. You're sitting in on board meeting conversations you're meeting folks like Josh, who are like at these huge companies, and you're hearing about all this important stuff. And at companies, you don't have that same access to that information. And ultimately, I kind of said, if I find the perfect venture job with the right team and opportunity to advance, I'd take it. And I found myself in it. And to the point on why we're all here, I mean, it just this luck of joining back in venture in 2008, when the world was crashing. Everyone thought we were going to turn into like the Great Depression, and I'm this like fresh-faced post-business school person saying, I want to make investments, and Twitter looks good, and I did this company called Yext that looks really good right now, and Buddy Media like within a year, and basically that like 2009, 2010 for me are incredible for my career. Everything else, I have no idea. But like those 2 years, we're so lucky. And if not for those 2 years and joining when I did, I don't think I'd be here. So timing matters so much as well for both entrepreneurs and venture capitalists.
I remember my first day on the job was the day when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt and the announcement was made. And I remember my boss and I landed in New York for a board meeting. And as we landed, he looked at the news and he's like, "Oh my God, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt and the market is down." And my first thought was, I'm so grateful all I have is debt. I have nothing to worry about. You guys.
If it was with Lehman Brothers, you wouldn't have any of that
Yeah,
either.
exactly, exactly. That's true. And I was like, oh, all I have is like, a bunch of debt from school. And so no downside for me here. It's all going to be upside from now on. But the way I went into venture was also by luck. I had no intention of being part of in a venture firm. My background is software product development. So I was a software engineer for a few years, and then I switched to product management. And I went to business school to study, I wanted to study business foundations because I wanted to change, to some extent, my career. And I took a class on entrepreneurship, and I was writing a business plan as part of that class, and had to work with an investor who would give me feedback on the plan. And after 3 months of when the class was over, that investor happened to be the managing partner of Venrock, who called me and said, "Well, I don't know if you have any plans for after business school, but if you don't, you can join and work with us here for a couple of years." He believed that venture is an apprenticeship business and that you learn by working with someone who has done it for a long time. So the 2 years for me were incredible because he brought me with him to every single board meeting that he was part of. And he happened to be on 15 boards, so it was an incredible experience. And in the meantime, I got lucky to find a couple of good investments, which earned me the right to stay in venture longer.
It is amazing how much it is a happenstance kind of business, which is why you do so many things. Like you spend a lot of time meeting and hanging out with lots of interesting people, et cetera. I was an entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School at the Rock Center, despite the fact that I wasn't an entrepreneur in residence. I didn't ask questions. And I met this amazing young student, and we chatted, and she worked at a Silicon Valley company. I caught up with her, and then when she was graduating, I said, "Hey, you want to grab breakfast?" And I had breakfast with her, and I said, so you should be a venture capitalist. Why don't you talk with us about joining the firm? And she said, "No, I don't want to do it." We had the song, "No, I don't want to do it." And she was quite insistent. "No, I really don't want to do it." I said, "Okay, fine, then you need to introduce me to the people who are like you. Introduce me to the person who you would hire since you won't do it." And she introduced me to an incredible woman who's joining our firm after her graduation this year. So this was like once removed, but it actually is sort of a good example of, so how do you meet a venture firm, right? Which is, people always protest when you say, well, you have to get an introduction, you have to connect directly to us. Like, well, what if I don't know Jules? What if I don't know Ben? Fair point, but ultimately it's what I call the transitive property of relationship. It's spending time and getting really amazing people excited about what you're doing so that they will then pass on the excitement and energy of what you're doing. So you have more degrees than any of us. This is a far too many degrees crew. So what do you think? Would you do it again? And what was your path through multiple business degrees and law and all those things?
Yeah, so I'm a recovering lawyer, like you.
Yeah.
I spent a couple of years working for Cooley in Palo Alto, which is one of the firms that represent a lot of tech companies and venture firms and what have you. And then I went off to become an entrepreneur. And it turns out being an entrepreneur is really hard. And I thought I would enjoy the investment side more than being an entrepreneur. And I sat on the doorstep of my firm until they gave me a job, or at least gave me a project to work on, and then which ultimately turned into a job. And I think that part of what being a successful entrepreneur, or being a successful venture capitalist is about is not necessarily seeing that closed door or a CEO unwilling to schedule a meeting with you as as something that's not able to be overcome. You have to think of them as obstacles that you can get over. And I think the people that are successful, both as entrepreneurs and as venture capitalists, are the people who see those obstacles and figure out ways either to get over them, around them, through them, et cetera. And I think those things, we all see this in our careers and in our lives, that you have to figure out how to navigate and get around those bulwarks that are in your way.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that is perfectly clear to me, we've all sat up here and, venture is hard. Venture is a piece of cake compared to entrepreneurship, right? I mean, the fact that entrepreneurship ever works is completely miraculous. One of the things that's such a joy about this job is that we get to experience this magic where you have a few people, something interesting, and through a bunch of alchemy, it turns into, you have companies that are hiring thousands of people, that are making lots of money, that are building big, that are transforming the world. I think that's amazing, but it's also impossible, right? It's an incredibly hard thing to do. And so for the first 10 years that I was in the venture business, when you'd say, oh, hey, David, how do you think about the venture business? When you're pitching me, David, how do I think about it? What's the path? I'd always say, well, I'm just looking at people. It's just people, because ultimately you all have to transform. You have to create market opportunity from nothing. You have to create products from nothing, et cetera. And then I realized, having watched Splunk go from 3 amazing people to a multi-billion-dollar thing that had to then sell hundreds of millions of dollars of software, that there was another element to it. And so in my second, now in my second 10 years, it's people, markets, people. Because it turns out that it's really hard to build a giant business in a small space, right? It's much easier to build a big, giant business if you're chasing something that's big and giant. And so, when Ev presents a plan and says, well, we're going to touch hundreds of millions of people and then make hundreds of millions of dollars, VCs looked at that and said, yes, I can see how that would work, right? So as each of you thinks about this business and working with each other, or if you're thinking about the venture business, it's people and it's opportunity, and how those things come together. We're running to the end here, but I'm curious if you have any advice for entrepreneurs as they're thinking about either pitching us or starting a business or whatever, or maybe the future VCs. Any closing wisdom you care to share that I can then heckle?
Ben, do you want to start?
Look, I think the best advice that I have for entrepreneurs is seek candor. Seek people who are willing to give you very blunt and sometimes difficult feedback about your ideas. Because by learning from that feedback, or figuring out why that feedback is wrong, or why that feedback is right, you get better, and your ideas get better over time. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs have the belief that they're going to shun the difficult conversations, or shun the problems that they see in their business. And I think the opposite is true. I think you need to spend time really focusing on the things that are difficult and the advice that's hard to hear.
It is amazing how often entrepreneurs get angry when you explain why you're turning them down. Like, oh, you misunderstood my business, whatever. No, that's incredible feedback. Like, yeah, it's unfortunate that you're getting turned down, but you're going to get turned down by lots of people. Listen to the feedback, because even if it's wrong, it at least gives you a sense of what numbskull VCs think, so you can pitch it differently the next time.
True. I would say that it's very important to do what you love. And so if you're starting a company, it's going to be very difficult. I've seen it by partnering with CEOs who started their companies and are running them, and it's a roller coaster ride, and everybody says that. But if you don't love what you do, it'll be hard to be successful. I would say that just remember, not all businesses are venture backable businesses, and that's okay. Again, if you love what you do, you will find the right set of investors for your business. Venture capital is only a very small portion of the type of investors that back businesses that grow to be big, impactful, successful companies. So before you even launch onto a fundraising, think about who are the right types of investors and who your business will appeal to so that you have more productive conversations and so that you can find the right types of partners that will help you build the kind of business that you want to.
Yeah, and I guess I'd add, especially at the late stage, I mean, we're looking for companies that are going after those huge markets. What's interesting, which is a little bit different than what David said, is that I think a lot of those companies don't start off thinking that they're going to go after huge markets. I mean, Travis really just wanted to get home at 2 a.m. from San Francisco, you know, so he didn't have to drive a car and the taxi sucked, and he wanted that limo, right? He didn't think about this global scale company and Uber X and all those different dynamics about it, but he always had the ambition to try to think about where else can I take the business beyond what I'm doing today. So we actually love when businesses, they start small, they dominate a particular niche. You know, Snapchat's focused on disappearing messages for 16-year-olds. You know, now it's broadened. Facebook was focused on college students and at Harvard only, right? And then it's broadened. So I really think the great companies are ones that they don't actually start off saying, hey, I'm gonna reach billions and billions of people. They start off saying, I'm gonna solve one specific problem, but then the entrepreneur goes, if I do that, can I extend that to more people in bigger markets? And if they're able to do that, then you start creating great companies.
Guys are awesome. Ben, Dafina, Jules, thank you so much. The folks at University Growth Fund for bringing us together, thank you, and thanks for all your time.